friends, so glad you're here. This is the See the Light, Yes You Can Draw club meeting. I'm Pat Nepley. I'm going to be with you through all of these meetings as your master artist. And I hope you brought a friend so they can learn how they can be a better artist too, because yes, you can draw. This is club meeting number 32. Now, we've been learning about an awful lot in these past few meetings. Remember, we did perspective, and we learned about the perspective of circles into ellipses. And we've been learning about foreshortening when you see something in exaggerated perspective. We also learned about symmetry and balance. Do you remember that? And so we're going to be putting all of that together in today's really special project. And so let's figure out what it is you're going to need for today's lesson. You'll need a larger piece of white paper, a standard pencil, a grade eraser. You'll need a nice fine marker, or even just a black pen will be okay, and a set of colored pencils. So we're going to be using a subject matter today that puts all of those things together that we had in the past 3 or 4 club meetings. And we're going to be doing a bug jar. Do you know what that is? That's for collecting bugs. Now you remember when we had our symmetry lesson, we did both a butterfly, we saw how that was formal balance, perfect symmetry, and we also did a ladybug. Well, a bug jar is what you would use if you collected bugs. Do you do that? Do you collect bugs? Do you know a lot of people collect a lot of different things? And there's so many different bugs in the world. In fact, there's over 1,017,000 species of insects alone. God made every one of them. That's incredible. Well, I'm not a super huge fan of bugs. I'd rather they be in the jar than on the ground. So let's start with our special project of the bug jar, where we get to do ellipses, which is circles seen in perspective, and opportunities to use both informal balance and symmetrical or formal balance. So grab your paper and your pencil and let's get started. Put your paper in a vertical alignment like this. And the first thing we're going to do, friends, is get the sides of our jar. We want it to fill the entire page. So the sides are going to come down fairly straight, like this. It's a big jar. But then it curves in to the top, like this. Now I'm drawing darker because I want you to see it, but you can keep your lines light. At the bottom of the jar, it's as if there is an ellipse there, and we only see the front part of the ellipse, but the back part would be very light because it's the other side of the glass. Can you see that ellipse? Now when we get to the lid of our jar, we don't want those bugs to get out. It's actually several ellipses. The bottom of the lid is a half of an ellipse. The other half we don't see because it's behind. And then there's this top ellipse. Now, because our perspective is such, our point of view, we're looking down slightly, we see a little bit of the top of the lid. Then we can erase the lines we don't need. Now remember, your lines are going to be light, mine are darker so that you can see it. So we have our ellipses up here, and the ellipse where you see part of the ellipse, the front part for the bottom of the jar. The back one you really don't see, you can sketch it in lightly, but that's the bottom of the jar. Now, we want to make sure that we have a balanced composition, so that means we're going to have a weight scattered throughout our jar. So let's put in a couple of larger objects. The first thing I want to put in is a twig. So no twig I know is perfectly straight. So a twig would be drawn much like a straw, not a wire, right? So it's not a single line, it's 2 lines like a straw. But it's not straight like a straw. So do kind of a jaggedy line and a diagonal as if it's leaning against the side of the glass. It's going to be narrower at the top and wider as it gets towards the bottom. I think I'm going to make a little side twig out there too. So that would be our twig that's in our jar. Kind of bumpy, huh? The next items I want to put in that are going to be kind of large are some leaves, as if you gathered up some leaves. So we're going to put in a leaf shape, but it's going to be resting against this side of the jar, like this. And I can very lightly put in some veins for the leaf. But I want to put in a leaf here too. I'll see a little bit of the stem. And I'm going to put a leaf that's kind of on the bottom of the jar, like this. Well, you see I have a lot of weight down here, which makes sense. Things would fall into the bottom of the jar, right? But we're making this a bug jar. And we know that there's two different kinds of bugs. There's flying bugs, and then there's crawling bugs, or insects. But all insects have 6 legs. Do you remember that? We talked about that in our symmetry lesson. God created us in an amazing way. We need pairs of legs. Humans have 2 legs. Mammals, like your dog or your cat or your horse, have 4 legs. And so, in even numbers, the next is insects that have 6 legs, and that's how they get around. An odd number simply wouldn't work. And our insects have flying insects and crawling insects. Well, I want a flying insect up here because I need it to be up higher in my composition. Crawling would be down here, either on the twig or on the leaves. So what's an insect that can be larger and can fly? That's right, a butterfly. And this is where we get to use our formal balance, our symmetry. So you're going to first put in the body of the butterfly because that will be our line of symmetry. And all insects have 3 segments to their body: a head, a thorax, and an abdomen. And so 3 sections for your body. And I'm going to make this butterfly have nice big wings. Wings of insects always come out of their thorax. Their abdomen, it does not come out of their abdomen. So actually both of them are attached to the thorax. So here's an opportunity to have our symmetry, right? Where we have the formal balance. We want both sides of our butterfly to be the same. So once you have your pairs of wings, now you see I'm starting to get more informal balance. There's more weight up top than down here. I'm going to put in some antennae for my butterfly there. Now I can go back and put in a lot of detail on these wings. I can create shapes in the bottom of the wings, but whatever it is you do, you have to do it the same on the other side. That's symmetry, a mirror image. If you want to create an outline like that, put in some shapes in here. Always repeat it on the other side. Okay, now I can finish that at some other time, but there's now still all this empty space. I still want to have some more symmetry. I'm going to put a little moth down here so it's smaller than the butterfly. Again, it's an insect, so it has 3 segments. But one thing I do know about moths that makes them a little different from butterflies, and maybe you know this from where you live. They don't have skinny wire antennae, they have frilly fuzzy antennae. Like that. Hairy. That's what makes them a moth. So I'm going to put the moth there. I still have some space here. I need another flying insect, but I don't want it to be quite as large as my butterfly or my moth. So how about we put in a honeybee? It's still an insect, which means it has 3 segments to its body. I don't know if you like bees. I don't really like bees, but I'm glad God made them to gather honey and to pollinate plants. Now, insects have 6 legs. We talked about that. You don't see the butterflies. They're hidden behind her wings. But for our friend the bee, we're looking at him on the side here, we can see his legs. So we're going to put them in. Okay, time for some crawling insects. Because I have this big leaf here, that's going to need, I think, a bigger insect. But let's put our friend the ladybug that we learned about in our first symmetry lesson on this twig. Do you remember? The line of symmetry is the crack in her shell that separates the 2 halves. So I'll put 2 halves and some spots that match and mirror each other, and 6 legs. And there's our ladybug. I want a larger insect here, so let's do, how about a longhorn beetle? I want to work on some symmetry. They're perfect. They have a crease right down the back, and it's a very long bug. And it has very long antennae that are like giant antlers or horns, kind of named after the longhorn cattle, the longhorn beetle. This gives me an opportunity to show more symmetry by doing the 6 legs. How about an ant? They're tiny. Again, I'm creating balance with some large items, some small items. So I'll do my 3 segments for my ant. They have jaws, my 6 legs, and it's small on that leaf. Now friends, you can put in all kinds of detail. Marks for the bark of the twig, lots of detail in your moth, shape in the wings, hair on the moth's body, they kind of have hairy bodies, even the fine lines in the leaf. It's fascinating, all these bugs. There's so many. Do you know that insects are mentioned in the Bible? In fact, I bet you know the story where they're mentioned the most. And that's the story of when the Israelites were held captive in Egypt. And Moses wanted to lead them into the promised land, but Pharaoh wouldn't let them go. And so God sent 10 plagues. And do you know, out of those 10 plagues, 3 of them were insects. Let's read about it. The first plague of insects were lice. The next one were flies. And the one I'm going to read about now is locusts. Do you know what a locust is? It's a really ravenous, hungry, chewing grasshopper. And they don't come one at a time. They come in swarms of thousands. Here it is in Exodus 10:12-13. And the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over Egypt, so that the locusts swarm over the land and devour everything growing in the fields, everything left by the hail." So Moses stretched out his staff over Egypt, and the Lord made an east wind blow across the land all that day and all that night. And by morning, the wind had brought the locusts. They invaded all Egypt and settled down in every area of the country in great numbers. Yikes, that was probably pretty scary. I don't mind a few bugs, but a swarm, that's incredible. And you know, Pharaoh still would not let the people go. It was awful for the Egyptians. They begged and pleaded with Pharaoh, "Please let the Israelites go." All of their crops had been taken by the swarm of locusts. So isn't that interesting that we can even learn about insects in the Bible? So friends, after you have your basic sketch of what you want in your bug jar, remembering formal balance through symmetry and informal balance of how you place the objects, our next step is to take our black fine marker and actually sketch things in over the pencil lines in marker. This is going to make for a great effect, but it takes some time. You're simply going to go over the pencil lines that you want. And if you have anything that's solid black, like parts of the ladybug, you can do it in pen as well. And so I'm going to go over each of these lines in pen. Fine pen is a great opportunity to put in detail, like the veins of these leaves. I can even get even finer and put in more veins of the leaves. So you're going to need to spend some time inking your entire bug jar. So why don't you pause this now and spend some time inking, then erase all the lines from pencil that you don't want, and we'll come back together and finish working on our project with color pencil. So how'd it go, my friends? Did you spend some time inking your bug jar? I know it took time, but I bet it turned out terrific. And the detail you can put in with a fine pen is really great. In fact, here on mine, you'll see I even put in some shadows under this bottom leaf because it's resting on the bottom of the jar. And a shadow on this side of the twig, since it's also not in the light like the top is. Now for fun, I added a little inchworm on my twig. You can add whatever you want in your bug jar. Here's the great thing, my friends. God made you to be creative, and you're the artist for this project, and you can make it however you want, and it's not wrong. In fact, we're getting ready to start coloring our bug jar now with color pencil. I already did my ladybug, but if you wanted to make your ladybug purple, that's okay. It's your drawing. But I started with getting a red-orange pencil, and I shaded in, and you can see how great it looks against the black pen. Now I'm ready to move on to my twig. So I'm going to pick up a couple shades of brown. And remembering some of our principles of color blending, I'm going to do light layers. I'm going to go right over those ink lines because those will pop right through. But since twig is covered in bark, it doesn't have to be real solid like paint. I can let some of the white peek through. And I can change my pressure so that I have different kinds of marks. So this is my lighter shade of brown. I'm going to go all along the twig. You can see the color is a little uneven, and that's okay. Even the end of my twig, where it's cut. But now I'm going to take my other brown and I'm going to go back in and kind of make some long lines so it looks more like bark, kind of over my brown that I already did there. And on the side where I have shadow, I'm going to make it a little bit darker. Do you remember some of the techniques for color blending with color pencils? We can do cross-hatching or scrumbling. So I can even do hatch lines, which is little parallel lines that are real close next to each other to get whatever technique looks best for what it is I'm filling in. So here I'm going to hatch across. I want to get the large objects done first, but there's bugs on them. I don't want to color over those. But I think for the sake of balance, I want one leaf to be a lighter green and one leaf to be a darker green. So let's start with my darker green leaf. I'm going to do it this one here. I'm going to take my time. Since the leaf is not covered up with a lot, just our little ant friend. Of course, he's in black. He was inked. So I don't have to worry, I can go right over him. But I want to be careful when I get to the edges. I don't want to go past my ink edge of the leaf. So carefully go up close. When you're doing a long item like this, especially something that has direction like these veins, you want to color or make your strokes with your color pencil in the same direction. If it was a circular object, I would actually make my strokes in a circular direction. I want to follow the direction of these vein lines when I'm coloring in with my green. Now, color pencils can give you light layers, or if you put in a lot of pressure, can get much darker. I'm actually going to get a little bit darker as I go up to that center vein line. And that'll create the illusion that the leaf is curved sitting in the bottom of that jar. Okay, you can see how spending time coloring might eat up a lot of our time together with the art club. So I'm going to move on to another area. You can see with my butterfly and moth the importance of keeping them symmetrical. So whatever colors I do on the one side or one pair of wings, I need to do on the other. That's how we achieve balance. The best part is, though, with butterflies, there's so many different types, so many different colors. They're amazing. In fact, here's a great piece of artwork by our friend Salvador Dali. We looked at an artwork that he gave us last time when we were talking about foreshortening. And this painting is called Landscape with Butterflies. Can you see how different the butterflies are in there? One's larger than the other. They have totally different coloring and markings, but they both show perfect symmetrical balance. So back to our butterflies, you can make them pink, purple, red, yellow, whatever you like. Moths are usually not as bright as butterflies and have a lot more brown in them, but again, as the artist, you decide. Now I know I'm going to have a lot of green on the bottom here with my leaves. I'm probably going to use lots of pinks and purples, colors like that up here. So I think I don't want to use that in the lid. For balance, I want to make sure I have a stronger color up top that probably wouldn't be in other parts of my drawing. So I think I'll use blue. There's not a lot of blue bugs, and there's a lot in nature that's brown and green. So for my jar, let me show you how you would use color pencil to get good perspective and value shading to make this lid look like it goes around the jar. So first I'm just going to give a nice solid light layer of blue on the side of this lid. I'm using an overhand grip and I'm going across lengthwise like this. But we know that this is really a round lid going around the jar. And you can see I already made some pen marks on the edges to show a change in value. But now I'm going to actually use a lot more pressure on the edges, and as I move towards the center, I'm going to lighten up. I'm going to do the same on this side. Increase your pressure of your color pencil so it's much darker, but as you move towards the center of this lid, lighten up. And so by changing my pressure, I have darker values on the edges and lighter towards the center. It looks like the lid is round. Now this is a flat surface for the top of the lid, so it really won't change value. It is flat, so it's just one solid shade of blue. So I'm going to make it lighter. So you can finish your drawing on your own, friends, using your color pencil and creating exactly what you want for your bug jar. In fact, you might notice that I also even put in little reflection marks on my jar to show that it's glass. You can outline these long curved rectangles, and you can even take something like a light purple, and just a little bit of light purple at the edges kind of shows that this is glass. Of course it's see-through, but there actually is very slight color to glass. Could either be green or blue, and so a very light touch of purple on the edges shows that this is a glass jar. So you're going to continue on your bug jar, and I bet they're going to be amazing when you're finished. So beautiful. All the colors that you can use because you're the artist. But doesn't it make you realize what a great designer God is when you look at all of creation up close and see the beauty, the symmetry, the color, and the detail? It's amazing. But it's all we have time for today. See you next time, friends.